And if you're sitting way in the back, there's plenty of room right up here in the front. I'm Kathy Morrison, the Faculty Director of the Environmental Innovations Initiative, also a faculty member in anthropology. And I want to acknowledge our co-sponsor here, the Center for Latin American and Latinx Studies. As you know, this is a hybrid format event, so just please bear with us in case we have any technical glitches. So we're here today to hear from a panel of experts about efforts to protect biodiversity at a variety of regional scales, from right here in Pennsylvania to efforts on the global stage, including next month's Convention on Biological Diversity conference, Convention on Biological Diversity, sorry, not enough copy, Conference of the Parties in Cali, Colombia. On that note, I'm also pleased to announce that Penn, for the first time, will be sending a delegation to Colombia, and hopefully the first of many. So just a little quick note on the structure of the event. We'll start with a short introduction to the Convention on Biological Diversity by Carolina Botero. And then after that, I'll moderate a discussion with our panel, both in person and online. And we'll talk a little bit, or they'll talk a little bit, mostly about work that they're currently doing. Then after our discussion, if we have time, we hope to be able to take some questions from the audience as well. So let me just now introduce our speakers, and I'm going to do them all at once so that I don't have to interrupt everybody. We'll begin with Carolina Angel Botero, who is a postdoctoral fellow here at the center. She has a PhD in anthropology with research interests in anthropology and law, focusing specifically on transitional justice. Her current work aims to bridge law, science, and anthropology, focusing on natural sciences, definitions, and approximations of nature. And currently, she's working on how recent developments in Latin American legislation on the rights of nature have led to new questions about the political capacity of nature to gain subjecthood, legal standing, and even citizenship rights. Very interesting. So then on the panel, and in the order that we'll hear them speak, we have Fernanda Jimenez, who is a visiting scholar here and a Costa Rican lawyer specializing in environmental and international law. She's worked as the legal advisor at the Department for the International Cooperation of the UN-mandated University for Peace, this is a real mouthful, and as a legal consultant with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, helping several governments in the Caribbean region develop their national biodiversity laws. She's a former president of the Costa Rican Society for International Law, and she's currently a visiting lecturer at the UN-mandated University for Peace, teaching a class on international environmental law. Very impressive. And next will be Emilio Latorre. Are you up there? There you are. Okay. He has a PhD in urban and regional planning and is at the Universidad de los Andes, Bogota, Colombia. During his long and distinguished academic career, he's participated in the establishment of the Colombian Environmental Policy and Ministry. He created the Environmental Protection Agency of Cali, Colombia. He's held leadership roles in any number of environmental organizations and published very extensively on environmental management. Since 2023, Emilio has served as the Senior Fellow of the International Sustainable Campus Network and its Latin American chapter. Next will be Julie Ellis, here from Penn. Julie holds a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology. She's an adjunct associate professor of pathobiology, at the PennVet School. She's over 20 years of experience of collaborating and leading investigations of wildlife, ecology, and health. She not only initiated, but also co-directs the Wildlife Futures Program at the School for Veterinary Medicine. Wildlife Futures Program launched in 2019, and it's a novel partnership between PennVet and the Pennsylvania Game Commission that's aimed at strengthening the resilience of Pennsylvania's 480 species of wild birds and mammals. And then last, but definitely not least, we have Keith Russell, who is the Audubon Program Manager for Urban Conservation. Keith works on a variety of bird conservation issues, including bird collisions with man-made structures, birds and nocturnal lights, non-native plants, and migration stopover habitat. His work has used education, monitoring, research, advocacy, and habitat restoration to improve conditions for birds in ways that have also broadened community engagement in the environmental movement. Previously, he worked as the program assistant for the National Audubon's Important Bird Area Program, and very impressive to me, the assistant editor for the Birds of North America, a key publication, and as collections manager at the Academy of Natural Science at Drexel University. So we have this star-studded panel. You don't want to hear any more from me. Carolina, can you get us started?
Sure. So thank you, Catherine, for the introduction. So I'm gonna present very quickly the CBD that it's part of the reason that we're here. So the CBD, or the Convention on Biological Diversity, is an international agreement to conserve biological diversity, promote sustainability, and ensure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits from genetic resources. Those are the three main objectives of the CBD. It has been ratified by 196 nations, except for the USA. Sorry, I forgot this. And the Vatican. It was adopted in Rio de Janeiro Summit in 1992, alongside two other environmental conventions. One is the Convention to Combat Desertification, the UNCCD, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. So you've heard of many COPs, and we're gonna get into that very, very quickly. But we're gonna talk about the Conference of the Parties from the CBD on this session. So the CBD governing body is the Conference of the Parties. It reunites representatives from all governments that are party, that have ratified the treaty, and meets every 2 years to review the progress on the conservation of biodiversity, set the priorities, and commit to the work plans that are designed in every country at the national level. The CBD encompasses biodiversity at all levels, including ecosystems, species, and genetic resources. It also addresses biotechnology through the Cartagena Protocol and on biosafety, and the fair utilization of genetic resources through the Nagoya Protocol. The protocols are supplementary agreements to the CBD. The coming Montreal Global Diversity Framework, and I'm putting all these concepts out there just like to get you to understand a little bit about what we're going to be talking about. Or the GBF was adopted during COP15, so the past COP that it took place in Montreal, and there was another meeting incoming, and it was a very, very special COP, or Conference of the Parties, because it was the moment when renewed goals and targets were set for these coming years. So before the GBF, the Global Biodiversity Framework that was adopted in 2022, we had the HE biodiversity targets, or the strategic plan 2011-2020 that was adopted in the COP10. So that's why COP15 it was very important, because the targets that were set for the until 2020 it had to be renewed, and this new global framework was adopted. So the countries that are party to the convention have very clear responsibilities, such as developing the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and those are the ways in which the convention is brought to the national level. Providing reports on progress, and attending the periodic meetings, and this will bring us to what is the significance of COP16 in October in Cali. And it's the moment after COP15 where the agreement in Montreal was decided, and it represents the initial plan, the initial moment to collectively evaluate the progress on the GBF, and it includes and it's the moment to decide how are the country to see how the countries are contributing to these new goals. The Global Biodiversity Framework, or GBF, and particularly Target 3 aims to conserve 30% of land, water, and the seas. And you might have heard of it as the 30 by 30 goal. And it's very clear target on how to protect 30% of the world by 2030. In addition to this target, the framework includes other important goals such as halting species extinction, reducing pollution, and mobilizing funding and ensuring equitable participation and access of indigenous peoples and local communities. So this is the moment for this COP, is the moment where we're going to be seeing how these new set of goals are set in motion at the governments by the government that are part of the treaty. So with these, I'm going to leave it there. It was a very quick introduction to the CBD, but it would hopefully set the terms for what is coming next in the panel.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Carolina, for giving us that kind of overview. It's to the uninitiated, a welter of acronyms. But I want to turn to our panel now and have each one of them address the question that we raised in the title of this event: how is the world working to save biodiversity from the perspective of their own work? Fernanda, sure, you start us.
So first of all, thank you, Catherine, for the introduction, and thank you to Penn Environmental Innovation Initiative and to the Center for Latin American and Latinx Studies for hosting this event and inviting us all here to be here to speak about these very interesting questions. So as Catherine said, my name is Fernanda Jimenez. I'm an environmental lawyer from Costa Rica, and I've done mostly work there in the Latin America and also in the Caribbean region. And most of my work has been targeted around biodiversity, either for the sustainable use of the biodiversity or for its conservation. So I have worked in different aspects of the whole biodiversity framework that, as Carolina said, is very big. It has 23 different goals and targets. So there are a lot of different topics that you can work on when you're working on biodiversity. I have worked on issues related to creating new protected areas. So working on the 30 by 30 target of getting 30% of the planet protected by 2030. Also some work on target 7 that is related to the reduction of pollution, and specifically on the reduction and management of plastic pollution in Costa Rica and Central America. But what I wanted to talk to you about is my work that I've done on target 13, that it's related to the equitable sharing of benefits deriving from the use of genetic resources. So this is also a very technical part of the CBD framework and on the whole biodiversity framework, but it's I find it really interesting, and especially from the policy point of view. So my work around this, and because I'm a lawyer, has mostly been related to policy and developing regulatory frameworks to get countries to protect their genetic resources and to ensure that the benefits that come from the use of those genetic resources are shared with them and also with the local and indigenous communities that have protected those genetic resources and that have the traditional knowledge to use them. So what does this mean, basically? Is first, for those who are not too familiar with the concept, genetic resources are basically the information that it's in the DNA of species. It can be from plants, animals, microbial, that can be used by humans for different purposes. So it can be industrial or commercial, developing pharmaceuticals or cosmetics or a bunch of different products. It can also go into research and scientific scientific research, basically. But the issue with the use of genetic resources is that you don't actually need to harvest a lot of these, for example, plants to get their genetic resources, because what you're getting out of the plant or the seed of the animal, it's basically information. So once you get one or a bunch of specimens, you extract the information, and then you don't have to go back to the country to get more. And so what has happened in the world historically is that researchers go to countries that are very biodiverse, take a lot of the genetic resources, take them back to their own countries, develop different products or research that produces a lot of benefits, but the countries from where these resources are from don't actually get those benefits, and especially also the indigenous communities that were the gatekeepers of those resources don't get the benefits that were derived from them. So there was, in the context of the CBD, a whole framework developed on how countries could protect those resources and ensure that their benefits go back to them. That was developed through the Nagoya Protocol, that it's one of the like side treaties that was developed from the CBD, and now the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the GBF, is trying to implement a lot of those goals that were developed related to that. So my work started working with different countries, actually with the governments of a bunch of countries in the Caribbean. These are mostly small countries, island countries, that didn't have their own institutional or legal framework to deal with this issue. So how it works is basically, the ideal is that when a researcher comes to a country, they, instead of just taking the resources, they will get a permit from a governmental institution and negotiate what is called mutually negotiated agreements, that are basically a contract on how those researchers are going to share the benefits, if any benefits come from the use of those genetic resources. And for that, you need to designate an institution that is the one that processes those permits, a focal point that is the one that negotiates those contracts. So in my work, we were helping different governments to establish those frameworks, and also working, that was very interesting, with different indigenous and local communities to empower them basically to know how this framework works, so that when a researcher came to their communities, they would know how to handle that situation, so that they could ensure that some of the benefits were also coming back to those communities. And that involved a lot of work on capacity building, a lot of workshops, working with different representatives of the communities, and trying in the communities also to create that institutional framework, because sometimes we think about the communities as the community, but then if somebody is coming to ask for the right to use their traditional knowledge, who is going to be the spokesperson for that community, things like that. So it was very interesting work, but now the new side of this issue is the fact that once you take the genetic resources, extract the information from the DNA, it's gone through a process that is called digital sequence of that information, that it's basically converting that information into digital information that can be shared with everyone through the internet or through databases and things like that. And so the whole framework that worked on the basis that somebody was coming into the country to take the resource, basically stopped working, because then a researcher didn't need to go to Costa Rica or to Central America. They could just like go into a database, download the information that was in the DNA and start using them. And then the country from when originally that genetic resource came from would never know that this researcher was using that information. So now there is a whole work in progress to try to develop a framework to deal with this issue of digital sequence information, on how the benefits deriving from the use of that type of information is going to reach the countries and the communities. And that is something that it's being discussed right now, and it's going to be discussed in COP 16, that I believe that it's going to be very interesting. And the second point, and do not take too much of the time, that I'm very excited about, that it's going also to be discussed at the COP 16, is now the relationship between the CBD framework and a new framework that was developed like during 10 years, but it was finally adopted last year. That is the High Seas. It's called now the High Seas Treaty. The BBNJ, that is basically a treaty that works with biodiversity, but in the high seas. So in what we know as international waters, because the whole framework of the CBD on genetic resources was only applicable to resources that were under national jurisdiction. But the whole bunch of genetic resources that were in international waters didn't have an international framework on how people would get a permit to take those resources, or what to do with the benefits that could be shared between all humankind, or how those benefits should be shared. And a new framework was finally adopted last year in June. I was member of one of the delegations that went into the negotiations of this international treaty, and now the work is geared towards ratification of this treaty, because we need 60 countries to ratify this treaty so that the treaty enters into force. Right now, I think there are only 10 countries that have ratified the treaty, so it's still not in force. But these are two frameworks that are going to be working side by side, the CBD and now the High Seas Treaty, on how to deal with the issue of genetic resources. And also there is issues of traditional knowledge in the High Seas Treaty that is going to be very interesting to see how in the COP 16 this new relationship is going to be discussed. So those are the two main issues that I find very excited at that point, and I wanted to start the conversation talking about
that. Is terrific. I knew I would want to hear from everybody for at least an hour apiece, but that's not possible. Emilio, can we ask you now too? I know you have some slides for us.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Are you going to present the slides, or do I present them?
So he can share.
You can share your slides.
Okay. Well, good morning, Catherine and all. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting about how the world is working to save biodiversity, which is very important. And since I am in Cali, where the COP 16 is going to take place, I am going to speak of how are we working, the universities at the local level, for COP 16 and afterwards. So let me share with you some slides on what's the idea of our programming. Can you see them?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we have a network in Cali, which is called RUCAS, the local network of sustainable campus. And the idea of what I'm going to present you is to promote education and action in biodiversity protection in university campuses and their influence areas. So we have three topics that we are going to work. First, a seminar in biodiversity for university campus, which already started last week. It's a virtual seminar of six sessions. We have the second session tomorrow, and we have included in this this seminar many panelists and moderators that I am going to talk about them a little bit later. Then during COP16, the 28th of October, we will have a workshop on how universities can deal with biodiversity in their own campuses and in their environmental areas, which is very important. If we in universities are speaking about the biodiversity, well, our campuses should be biodiverse and should represent the biodiversity of the regions in which they are. And the third thing that we are going to do is a declaration of universities for biodiversity. We have been discussing this lately with universities in Cali, but with international organizations that I am going to speak a little bit later. So the seminar has 6 sessions. First, an introduction to biodiversity, which happens a week ago. Tomorrow, the state of world in biodiversity and the threats. Next week, biodiversity management in university campus. This session is going to be conducted by the University of Oxford, who I will explain what's their role now at the global level in university and biodiversity. Then we will speak about 4 research and innovations in biodiversity done by universities, support for education and research on biodiversity, which means botanical gardens, collections, and all the things that can help for research and teaching in universities. And last, how the university can engage in biodiversity protection at the local and regional level. The seminar is being organized by our network and Universidad Javeriana. I am helping with the organization of this seminar. We are having Oxford University that has a program which is called Nature Positive Universities. This is a very important project that Oxford has with UNEP, and the task and the idea of this program is to promote biodiversity in universities. And of course, we are having in our seminar 2 panelists from the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you to Jimenez Trujillo. We will have Cristina Lyons, Fernanda Jimenez, who is here with us today, and Carolina Botero, who is here with us today. And we have 8 countries and 18 universities in this seminar, which is the online seminar, free and in Spanish. The workshop during the Cali COP, the idea is how to develop a university biodiversity plan, how to assess a baseline. Each university has to have a baseline of what it is doing for biodiversity, and not only in the campus, but in procurement, because procurement is very important in the way that procurement can impact biodiversity elsewhere. Then we will have a short circuit on the campus where we are going to have this, and then we will have 2 case studies. I would like to invite the delegation of the University of Pennsylvania that is coming to COP16 to be with us this 28th of October in this meeting to work with us and hear and comment on these ideas. And finally, the declaration that we have called the Cali Chart is a declaration that the University of Cali are doing and which are showing to the world that we are interested in biodiversity and some principles that university can follow. This declaration is going to be signed by most of the universities here in Cali, but it will be endorsed by Nature Positive Universities, which is this program of Oxford and the United Nations, and by the International Sustainable Campus Network. And this declaration will later be put in the website of NPU, Nature Positive Universities, and ISCN, for all the people in the world from universities to endorse it and to sign it, which is something very important. We have just discussed this morning about that idea of this Cali chart, that I will be willing to send you the chart when we have a final version in the following weeks. So that's what I was wanted to tell you. We invite you to be here in Cali for COP16. And of course, if you're coming to Cali, please let me know. And perhaps you will join us in the 28th of October for this meeting and for any other information and help that I can provide for you when you are in Cali. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. We're really looking forward to this partnership. Now moving a little bit closer to home to Pennsylvania, let me ask Julie Ellis to speak.
Part of the fun thing about being on these panels is getting to learn about what other people are doing. And I'm practically like jumping out of my chair now. This is really exciting work that you all are doing. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here. I can drive my own slides, right? Sure can. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
The
Presentation.
on the bottom right. Icon.
Oh, right there.
Thank
you. Then I think it needs to go. Here we go. Okay. Thanks. All right. So yes, I'm at the University of Pennsylvania and I'm at the School of Veterinary Medicine. And I'll be telling you about a program that I run today that works to protect biodiversity in Pennsylvania. So protecting wildlife health is key to protecting biodiversity. Animals play essential roles in their habitats and in promoting functional ecosystems, but wildlife health is being threatened by a variety of factors, including pathogens, climate change, contaminants, and habitat degradation. Because of the threats to wildlife are so complex, protecting it requires close partnerships across disciplines and organizations. So this is why my colleagues and I launched the Wildlife Futures program in 2019, which is a novel partnership between PennVet and the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Together, we leverage the diverse expertise of veterinarians, species biologists, ecologists, and others to discover innovation and proactive solutions to complex wildlife health challenges. Based at PennVet's New Bolton Center in Kennett Square, our team of over 30 professionals conducts wildlife health surveillance, research, training, and outreach to inform and enhance the Game Commission's management actions. Many of the Wildlife Futures' current strategic goals and objectives align with the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework 2030 targets. Today, I'll just briefly share a couple of examples that fall within Target 4, specifically halting species extinction and protecting genetic diversity. I don't know how familiar you are all with how species are protected in the United States, but every state has a state wildlife action plan. And it really serves, each of the 50 states has these, and it really serves as the nation's blueprint for proactively conserving fish and wildlife to prevent species from becoming endangered. These plans identify species of greatest conservation need, or SGCNs, which include threatened and endangered species and other rare or declining species. The plans describe the habitats that are important to the SGCNs, key threats, needed conservation actions, research and monitoring plans, and the plans are updated every 10 years. The Pennsylvania Wildlife Action Plan, or PAWAP, contains over 600 of Pennsylvania's species of greatest conservation need. Probably you don't think of Pennsylvania as being very diverse, but it actually has a very high level of biodiversity. And the SGCNs include birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and invertebrate species. Wildlife Futures, in partnership with the Game Commission and the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, is developing the Wildlife Health section for the 2025 to 2035 Pennsylvania Wildlife Action Plan. We are identifying and prioritizing existing and emerging health threats and management actions through literature searches, semi-structured interviews, and surveys of agencies and wildlife health professionals. And then a synthesized summary of this work will inform the priorities for research, surveillance, and management actions through the next decade. And then just to give a specific example of what Game Commission is leading and what we are helping to support for a specific species of greatest conservation need in Pennsylvania, the Allegheny wood rat, is a species of conservation need because of its rapidly declining populations. Some factors that have contributed to its decline include habitat loss, food shortages, and disease, raccoon roundworm. Wood rats play an essential role in shaping their ecosystem. They inhabit rocky terrain where they disperse seeds, they increase soil fertility with their feces, and they provide habitat for other animals such as rodents, reptiles, and amphibians. Pennsylvania Game Commission is partnering with many agencies and institutions in the region for proactive conservation of the wood rat. Wildlife Futures Program provides veterinary support for the wood rat recovery program, particularly with efforts to establish a captive breeding program, where wild wood rats are brought into managed care at an accredited zoo for protected propagation. The offspring from this program will then be placed into the wild in Pennsylvania and in other states to bolster population numbers and to improve genetic diversity. Wildlife Futures is also helping to establish relationships between the agency and accredited zoos for this work. We're consulting on health and nutritional issues, conducting veterinary exams, and performing comprehensive testing on wood rat mortalities. So in short, we are supporting the Pennsylvania Game Commission's leadership role in this regional effort to preserve the Allegheny wood rat. If the recovery program is successful, it will have widespread benefits for many animals, not just the wood rat. That's it for me.
Thank you, Julie. That is terrific. I have lots of questions. And then finally, Keith Russell.
I'm going to stop sharing Keith here.
Hi, everybody. I work on really a variety of conservation issues here in Philadelphia, but the main conservation issue I'm currently involved with is the issue of birds colliding with buildings and other types of human structures. And for those who might not be familiar with this issue, most birds are strongly attracted to artificial light at night, just like insects, and this can cause them to collide with buildings. When buildings are emanating light at night, especially during periods when birds are migrating at night. And to make matters worse, because most birds are also unfamiliar with glass, when they encounter glass for the first time, mainly in the form of windows, they often fly into it because they're fooled by its reflective and transparent qualities. Unfortunately, this has become a really big issue, and it's now been documented to occur in almost 1,500 species of birds worldwide and over 300 species of birds here in North America. And it's an issue that can occur in almost any location where birds encounter human structures, including ships at sea, believe it or not, because there are a lot of oceanic birds that travel quite far over the ocean. And unlike other types of bird mortality, collisions with buildings can kill healthy individuals just as easily as they kill unhealthy individuals. And migratory species tend to be affected disproportionately by these collisions because many of them are exposed to large numbers of buildings when they pass through places of human habitation when they're migrating. So altogether, these collisions are now estimated to kill over 1 billion birds each year just in the US, and between 16 and 42 million birds each year in Canada. And I say over a billion because there are new estimates that have extended the number up to several billion, but we're not quite sure where that target should really lie. Is it 1 billion? Is it 2 billion? Is it 3 billion? We know it's more than one, but it's growing. And that's the important part that we need to be concerned about. That's a lot of birds. So this is a problem that's now considered obviously to be one of the most important conservation issues birds are facing worldwide. And there are a number of ways that this issue is being addressed, which I don't have time to go into right now, but interest in the issue is growing significantly from year to year. It's not just biologists, it's now architects and planners and other types of people that are paying attention to this because birds are such important parts of our lives and we don't want to lose them. And there are now a bunch of conservation organizations here in the United States and in other parts of the world that are working to increase awareness about this issue and how to address it. In terms of how this work aligns with the goals of the framework, I think it's strongly aligned with Goal A, which is to maintain ecosystem integrity, connectivity, and resilience. And since birds are so widespread and so many migratory species play important ecological roles, not just in different parts of a continent, but in different parts of the globe at different times of the year, local work to prevent migratory birds from being killed by collisions obviously is going to have positive ecological impacts that extend far beyond the local level.
Great, thank you so much. Then thanks to all of our panelists for the really interesting comments. So we'll just take a few questions among the panel, and then we'll open it up to audience questions. I don't have time to ask all the questions I want to, but maybe I'll just start with Emilio. You can hear me, Emilio. A question. Are you able to? Oh, there you go. Okay. I'm curious about the way in which you think the biodiversity on campus is important in terms of student education. When I teach a class on climate change, and I teach a class on agroecology, I always think about what some people have called the nature deficit syndrome, that a lot of our undergraduates, a lot of our students, have very little personal acquaintance with plants or animals or soil. How do you think that kind of lack could be addressed, with the kind of work that you're doing?
Thank you for the question. Well, I think this is very important because a university campus can be thought as a living laboratory where people who are in the campus can go around the campus and see vegetation, but not the beautiful vegetation and the French gardens very well kept, but really the biodiversity of the region. And that's a problem with the universities. We want to build beautiful gardens, impressive gardens, but not biodiversity gardens that show the biodiversity of the region. So we should start with that. And that's something very important, because if we develop these biodiversity campuses and explain them to students of other careers, then they will be acquainted of biodiversity in their campus, put names to the trees, put the tree names to the streets on the campus, put the vegetation names to the buildings instead of very important people, and many things that you could do with a university to show the importance of biodiversity. So I think this is very important. And the model that NPUs has produced for doing a biodiversity plan for a university is a biodiversity campus, procurement that doesn't impact the biodiversity elsewhere, teaching and research. And that's the model, and I will end there. Just only to ask Kate, what are the strategies that you can do for birds and to prevent them to collide with buildings? That's my question. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Yes, and let me just ask the panelists if you would like to just jump in at any point. And actually, Keith, just as Emilio brought up, I was, of course, thinking about all the many, many buildings that University of Pennsylvania has, including all of its health system buildings. Is there a movement to protect birds? I'm sure there are for the new buildings, but I'm wondering about the older ones, because we do quite a few of those.
Yeah, Penn has done more than just about any other university in the United States, thank goodness, to address this issue. And yet there's still so much more to do. I think the work that has been done at Penn is focused now on existing buildings, but there's still a need to make new buildings that are being created bird friendly. But there's so many things that can be done on university campuses besides taking responsibility in the form of, in terms of addressing this problem, in terms of making their new buildings bird friendly. And we've worked with Penn, worked with Temple University here in Philadelphia, and we've done work to incorporate information about this particular issue into the curriculum. And it's been fascinating to see that actually, affect so many students and get them involved in understanding things that they didn't understand before. We've done it in very creative ways, worked with art students, worked with people that are interested in business. There's so many different aspects of life that you can incorporate information about the environment into. Universities are fabulous places to work on issues of biodiversity. So I just think there's loads of things that can be done at universities, and I'm very, very happy that University of Pennsylvania, at least on the issues that I'm working on, has done so much.
Great, that's great to hear. Thank you. And just to quickly sort of change the topic a little bit, back to the issue of genetic resources or genetic diversity. I will say that I'm actually an archaeologist, and so I've done a lot of work on the changing plant and animal cultigens or domesticates through time. And if you think about the movement of domesticated plants and animals around the world, of course, for the last 10,000 years, they have been moving all over the place, right? So what some scholars have termed botanical legacies, right, are the unique, land races and other kinds of cultigens that farmers develop over, generations that are very specific to particular locations. And those obviously represent, really important forms of agrobiodiversity, right? So how do we balance, a kind of, the potential good of agrobiodiversity and the fact that plants and animals have already, proven to be quite mobile across the world, with the, rights of people who've developed these botanical legacies, whose, intellectual and cultural labor really is encoded in these forms of life.
Yeah, right. It's a very interesting question. Actually, the framework of the CBD doesn't deal too much with the plant genetic resources for agriculture. There is a whole other framework that deals with the different issues on for example, intellectual property of those types of genetic resources that were in some cases developed by local communities, but now, of course, in some cases developed by big corporations that also want to protect their intellectual property. So there are a bunch of different frameworks from the legal perspective that fall into that. However, speaking more about the local, the work of the local communities in creating those new or ancestral genetic resources, the framework of the CBD and the Nagoya Protocol, it's precisely geared towards trying to get those communities involved in these types of uses and to empower them on how they can request or feel themselves owners of those genetic resources and of the traditional knowledge that came with using those genetic resources. And in part of my work, what was really interesting is that in many of the situations where our local community gets a relationship with a researcher or something, they are very eager to share actually that information, to share the seeds and say, this we created and look at this works for this and for that. But in doing that, they're giving away a lot of the value that they have created through many times, many years, decades or centuries. So part of the work that is being done with this framework is precisely to help them understand that they own that value and that they should be ready to know how to engage with the researchers. And the whole framework is not about not sharing, but sharing in a way that ensures that everyone gets their credit and that gets their benefits. So it's part of the work with that.
Yeah, thank you. And then on the topic of community engagement, Julie, you have both, the state of Pennsylvania and PennVet, but could you say a little bit more about what the role of community engagement might be for protecting the biodiversity here in Pennsylvania, and maybe even for those of us here in the room, what the big threats are and what we should do?
It's huge, right? We have, a little over 30 personnel, and we do everything we can to protect biodiversity, but we need everyone on board, right? So it's doing, making little changes in terms of, your behaviors, avoiding, minimizing direct contact with wildlife. One of the things that we do when we do some community engagement is talk about things you can do to just keep wildlife safe, not congregating them, trying to avoid causing them to become sick by not cleaning out your bird feeder, for example. So a lot of our community engagement is just informing the public about things that they can do to protect wildlife. But we also do a lot of work, like our research that we do as a program, as I mentioned during my talk, really informs agency actions, provides some scientific support for some of the policy changes that these agencies want to make. So agencies are also part of our community that we do a lot of work with, doing this, like as our broader community where we want to actually implement some of the research results or use the research results that we have to inform implementation. So we work with agencies. We also have a large academic network and an academic community. So we go to conferences and talk about our results at conferences and build up community among our peers, other researchers at other organizations. One of the things that we're interested in doing too, and you asked the question about nature deficit disorder, right?
Yeah.
And I saw Keith nodding his head about that. One of the things is getting people to care. And I think it can be challenging, particularly when you're in an urban area and maybe you don't kind of see biodiversity as relevant to you, or maybe you're not even aware of biodiversity, right? So I think it's increasing awareness about what is out there in your environment. Even in urban areas, there are wildlife there, and there is biodiversity there, and it has a role in your life. I know I'm not supposed to ask questions, but I'm just kind of curious about what Keith is doing with his program to help with that nature deficit disorder.
I think it's so interesting, how our society has advanced and then gone backwards in certain respects, and this is definitely one of those areas. And it's certainly something that I've worked on in different ways in over the years. Before I was focusing on this issue of bird collisions, I did a lot of work with communities and with summer camps and after school programs. And, we would actually take kids from schools out into parks here in Philadelphia. So I think that the key thing is what I call transformational experiences. When someone is out and they see a centipede or something in the ground doing something incredible, or they see a bird that they just never thought existed, or they experience some sort of thing with nature, like seeing the stars unobstructed by lights, and they just are transformed and they never forget it. I think that's a real key part of getting people to understand the magic and the wonder and the mystery and spirituality of nature. It's something that they didn't create themselves. Humans had nothing to do with, and it's beyond us. And it teaches us many things. I think these transformational experiences get us to start thinking about that. And that's the key, to just get people out and away from TVs, away from computers, to actually smell and feel and taste and experience nature. It's like being at a concert live versus listening to a record. You feel things and you see things that are just unique. So being able to be exposed, just getting people away from their usual activities and being able to be exposed to nature in some way so that they have these experiences that never leave them, I think is a key.
That is terrific. I'm looking at my watch with alarm, and we're near to the time, but I wonder if we could maybe take one or two audience questions. Yes, sir.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this panel. I've learned so much. I'm Giovanni. I'm a graduate student in political science and Africana studies here at Penn. My question is about what do you think would be the practical implications of the United States not ratifying, right, the CBD? So I'm thinking both about the work of organizations here in the US, like some of you represent, but also about the construction and implementation of institutional and policy frameworks. So maybe it goes more to Fernanda and Carolina, but anyone could jump in on that question.
Carolina, do you want to say anything or?
No, Fer, go ahead. You are the expert.
No, I mean it's a very interesting question because once I gave a presentation on this framework and there is a very striking map on the countries that haven't ratified CBD, and it's like the United States, and then I don't know if 2 other countries in the world. So it's
The Vatican.
yeah, it's pretty amazing the fact that the US is not part of this framework, and I do think it has an effect. Always having the US as a key global player in a framework is very, very important. However, there are fortunately a lot of frameworks that don't have the US as a player. So I don't know if at the international stage now a lot of the actors are very used to working around that issue. It does at the policy level. It doesn't mean that at the practical level it doesn't have implications, and of course that it wouldn't be very valuable that the US was also part of this framework, and also specifically for the issue of genetic resources. It's very complicated because the framework works in a bilateral way. So once a researcher takes a resource from another country and tries to use it in another country, one of the checks and balances is that in the other country, if you want to register intellectual property that has genetic resources from another country, the institution would say, wait, did you get the permit to get this genetic resource? And this works if the country where the resource is going to be used is also part of the framework. So the fact that in the US there isn't a framework in that sense, it's a big loophole for the whole framework to work in that way. So yeah.
I would add something just very quick, and it's also not having the US in the discussions. So every 2 years, getting together and talking and thinking about like where to go in terms of biodiversity, because that's the main objective of the CBD. Not having the US in the discussions, I think that's a great loss for everybody.
That's a good point. Is there one final question? That's good because we are at 1:01. So let us thank all of our panelists for the really amazing work. Thank you all so much.